Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Kim Milford. I'm the Executive Director with the REN-ISAC, and I'm very pleased to be here with you today. Please allow me to introduce our panelists, which is more important than who I am. We've got Rob Loudon, Vice President for Information Technology and CIO at Indiana University. Michelle Noren, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Rutgers. Brett Blackman, Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at University of Nebraska, and Sean Reynolds, Vice President for Information Technology and Chief Information Officer at Northwestern University. So introduction of our topic. Today's focus is cybersecurity. It's an especially challenging and important focus as we emerge from this pandemic, and we think about restoring, evolving, and transforming as we do so. This topic and the organization of our discussion focuses on the findings from EDUCAUSE's top IT issues for 2021 and previous years, actually. In 2021, EDUCAUSE refactored their issues to help higher ed shape the role of technology, the role that will continue to play in recovery from the pandemic. You can find the resulting EDUCAUSE webinar and slides on their website if you want more information about that. So that's sort of the background, the framework that we'll be using. EDUCAUSE bucketed the top IT issues for 2021 into 3 post-pandemic scenarios. The restore scenario, where the institution tries to return to pre-pandemic conditions. The evolve scenario, where an institution changes to meet the new normal, whatever that is. In this scenario, there's an adaptive evolution to meet post-pandemic student, faculty, and staff needs wherever they are. And then the third scenario is the transform scenario. In this scenario, IT plays a major role in redefining the institution and taking an active role in creating the new future for higher education. EDUCAUSE noted that the institutions may be in multiple scenarios at the same time, and I think we'll see that theme continue in this discussion. Information security was listed as one of the top 5 issues in both restore and evolve. It's clearly foundational to initiatives that support the transformation of higher ed as well. Today, we'll ask our panel for perspective on cybersecurity as we emerge into from the pandemic, using EDUCAUSE's Restore, Evolve, and Transform framework. We'll ask them to share their thoughts on cybersecurity lessons learned, challenges, and opportunities for the future. Launching into questions for the panel. Will we ever really restore, that is, go back to cybersecurity as it was before working from home, SolarWinds, ransomware, and remote hybrid learning on a massive scale? This is a multi-part question, so you might want to follow along if you can. Are incremental changes, stay the course, sufficient? Is new thinking required? How does your school's collaborative partnership with the OmniSOC contribute to your cybersecurity strategy? Michelle, I'm going to ask you to lead off on this.
Great, thanks, Kim, and I'm glad to be here with all of you. And you know, I think cybersecurity has always been a key priority for all of us as institutions. I don't think there's anything really new about that. I guess how I'm coming at it these days, though, is based on what we've learned being remote and through the pandemic and some of these trends, Kim, that you pointed to and recent activities. In my view, I think we need a reinvigoration of our thinking around cybersecurity. Clearly, the things that we've been doing in the past are important. Our ability to defend, protect, resolve, I think all of those are still important. But it feels like we need to sort of re-elevate the importance of it. And I think we're being forced to do that, frankly. I think that in the cycle that we're in right now, there is so much going on to some degree outside of our spaces, but it is forcing us to to re-engage, reinvigorate, remind ourselves about what we're doing, why we're doing the things that we are, and what needs to be different. So I know for us, we're busy thinking about, you know, how are we defending and protecting? What new things should we be doing? I think our partnership with OmniSOC, with our sister schools, is right on target with that reinvigoration. We've known since being part of this program and helping build it that we can't do it alone. We need partners. We are really good in higher ed at sharing notes. I think that that just comes with the territory. But I think our ability to be intentional and leverage that sharing in this way with this program is critical for us. I think it gives us an advantage to see more, to maybe be more prepared, if we can ever say that, in terms of threats and how we have to respond. But from my perspective, having a program like this is right in line with the things that we should be doing and our new thinking as we start to come back on site. I mean, I know for us, our remote learning and working, it added challenges in there that maybe we dealt with it before when people were off campus, but not in this way. I mean, there's just a new set of pressures here that are forcing us to rethink. So I'll stop there, Kim.
Thank you. Brett, your response?
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and great feedback, Michelle. I agree with everything you said there. You know, so for us, I really view the cyber approaches as going through a dramatic shift right now. I mean, the incremental change method, in my mind, just doesn't function going forward. We've seen in the last 12 months of the pandemic just being accelerated in this space. It was already at a really incredible pace in my view. You know, we've got constant attack vectors that are changing. We've seen a huge spike in ransomware in higher education. We've seen vendors under attacks themselves, whether that be SolarWinds or Mandiant and other companies based on that. And so, you know, the landscape has changed, and it's here, I think, for a while, and something that we obviously need to respond to as higher education here. And then you throw in challenges like budget when you're going through a pandemic and increase in cost of doing some of these services with security. I mean, security is not cheap. Retaining resources in this space is a significant challenge, I know, for all of us. The vendor space is constantly going through consolidations and mergers and acquisitions, and it's also creating some challenges for us to keep pace with 5-10% plus increases annually on some of these vendor costs. So that's a shift as well. And of course, the workforce. It's not just the IT workforce, but our entire workforce at our campuses and the changes that we're going through in that remote world that they're in. And so our traditional model of our campuses and our borders and firewalls as being kind of the premise of our security plan is still important, but that's shifted a great deal now. I mean, it's no longer just the only primary defense model we have. We, like everybody else, have done a complete shift of workforce, and now our priorities focus even more so on that remote world. We've always had a little bit, now we have to do it at scale. And so when we look at solutions such as VPNs, how do we do that at scale in a way that matters now, even more so? You're not talking about 10% of the workforce, you're talking 100% of the workforce now. And how do you make sure that you have security checks on those VPN logins? And so you have health checks, HIP checks. And so you're looking at making sure adequate patching is in place and adequate security protocols that we as IT need to help set to protect our assets as part of that. And multi-factor, of course. Now you look at endpoint management, and now the importance of managing those endpoints are even more so now as people are off our campuses and off our networks using their home connectivity to do that. That matters. And, how do we make sure that we're patching those and that we have the latest, vulnerability management and XDR types of products to do that. And education, I think, is a big piece too. I mean, I think the comforts of being at home and kind of conveniently forgetting some of our expectations around security is natural. And, when you have multi-factor on all your accounts, like I know we do here in Nebraska, that doesn't always ensure that you have 100% understanding of what that means. And so, it provides a defense mechanism, but, we still have scenarios where people click accept on that, not knowingly what's happening, and their accounts get compromised. So I think education is a big part of that. For us, OmniSOC is really our first line of defense on our security operations. As Michelle mentioned, we can't do this at scale on our own. We just simply don't have the resources or the people power to do that. And so we've seen extreme value in working together as all of us have to gain that scale, whether that's through the technology, it's through the people, it's the 24/7 type of coverage. It really helps lower the barriers for us from a security standpoint. And so we can focus on additional high value security initiatives on our campuses. And of course, that threat hunting that OmniSOC provides and activity is critical for us. And just learning from each other, I think, has really been impactful.
I think you guys really hit that out of the park. Thank you. I saw nodding from Sean, Rob was nodding, I was nodding. So even just the response that I'm seeing was very much right on. So thank you. And I took some notes because you had some really good framing around both the challenges and the opportunities. Thank you for that. That kicks us off in the right way. I'm going to move us into the next question. In the evolve scenario, cybersecurity operation strategies must evolve to mitigate and respond to threats, regardless of where students, faculty, or staff are located. How does this impact your resource choices? And based on your school's experience with the OmniSOC, what might be key points for other CIOs who are rethinking how to resource their security and privacy strategies? Rob, can we start with you?
Absolutely, and thank you, Kim. It's not lost on me as the newest CIO on this virtual stage that I'm sharing here. So I as much as I share your enthusiasm about the integrity and the depth of the responses from my colleagues thus far, it does set the bar pretty high. But that said, new to the role, stepping into the CIO role here at IU and knowing that I had an asset and resource like the OmniSOC was just incredible. I can't fathom stepping into a role during a global pandemic and, instantly out of the gate last summer, the blackbaud breach that impacted so many higher education institutions across the country. You mentioned SolarWinds as well. To keep the operations running in the midst of all the changes of the pandemic, the depth, breadth, and resources of the OmniSOC have just been an absolutely incredible asset to have. And so, for our colleagues out there that are, entertaining their cybersecurity strategy, I would say, as the newest to the bunch, it was an area of great relief to know that we had the capabilities and the resources and the talent, and that wasn't a challenge that had to be addressed, at least at IU, and I imagine for many of the other OmniSOC partners that are such a critical part of this. It's something else that's not lost on me as it relates really to the evolve scenario. A colleague of mine here in the state of Indiana, Indiana University Health is the largest healthcare provider in the state of Indiana. And a colleague of mine there, Mitch Parker, is the CISO. And I was having a conversation with Mitch recently around which ISACs he was most interested in, and of course the HISAC as a medical institution was part and parcel to his immediate response. But interestingly enough, he mentioned that they are also a member in the REN-ISAC, one of the nearly 700 members in the REN-ISAC, and his description of there really, it seemed profound at the time, but upon reflection, it's a story that we know well, and that was. His perspective was simply around the value and the assets that the REN-ISAC were able to provide with their unique knowledge and understanding of products and services and really the culture of higher education that doesn't always exist in a exclusive hospital system, but in a medical learning environment like a learning hospital. Products that are used at the university aren't always used everywhere else in the nation. And so, the REN was able to fill that void where the HISAC might not be familiar with an LMS or products that are pretty exclusive to higher education. So, I think that is another nice combination that so many of us have access to in the higher education landscape.
Sean, your response, please.
Yeah, so trying to find something unique with everything that's been said so far. I really think that when we first spoke about creating the OmniSOC, back in 2016, we recognized that there was that fundamental shift that Brett was talking about, that we weren't moving along a curve anymore. And our historic investment in an incremental way wasn't going to be able to thwart the new threats. And then, so I struggle with the word evolve even in this context, because it is, you know, information security continues to throw quite dramatic shifts in terms of how we need to respond. Notwithstanding the examples of pandemics or third-party partnerships like SolarWinds, just regulations when it comes, you know, our core mission, or one of our core missions of research and the ongoing requirements there. So the question becomes, how do we do that which we have always historically done? And I would call that security operations, and ensure that we have the capacity to meet those unanticipated and ever-growing challenges that are in that information security world. So, you know, we can talk about the OmniSOC in terms of efficiencies, doing things collaboratively and or more effectively. And I'm a real big believer in what was spoken about this morning when we talk about big data, finding things fast that we otherwise wouldn't have even potentially found with the aggregation of data. But also, so that detection and response, and there's a lot of objectives of going beyond where we are today. If we can commoditize that and share that in a sector-specific way, because it's not consistent with other sectors, then on campus, we have the capacity to become more proactive, I'm gonna say, in our security programs. And that's where now, when you have requirements for additional resources, can we be putting that into things that were unanticipated, or introduce more programmatic prevention, I'm gonna call it. And we can think of all the examples there. And I think we're under increased pressure to be doing that all the time. So the OmniSOC gives us that ability to, I'm not gonna say carve off, because you still do local operations, but not have to increase investment in that area to the magnitude that we would need to do in order to be secure in incident response going forward. I better stop.
Thank you. I love the strategic yet practical approach.
So Kim, I thought I might add a chime in here as well to reiterate, and Sean, you touched on this. When we first looked at OmniSOC, we did a pretty deep review on the cost comparison, right? What were we able to leverage in the resources and programs that we already have, both at our schools, and certainly IU, you play a bigger role in this space. So when it really boiled down to that cost comparison of how much would I have to invest, and Sean, you touched on this, how much would I have to invest to build up the program that we were comparing to based on what we already have across our schools? I couldn't come up with the money. So my ability to invest in it at a lower level and gain more functionality was a major consideration when we were thinking about building this program. So I wanted to put a fine point on that, because when we talk about resource comparisons and how we invest, this is one of those where early on we knew that by making an investment, it's not without an investment, but I can make an investment that at a lower level that gets me more coverage than if I'm trying to do it by myself. So I remember we went through those exercises of laying out all the spreadsheets and all the costs and the comparisons, and you know, it's definitely part of the equation here when we think about the program.
That's a great ad. Thank you. Any other follow-up?
I would just emphasize everything you said, Michelle, and it's not lost on me that, you know, that investment actually returns on investment. As this morning, the CFO at IU sent me, along with the treasurer, a request to complete the Moody's bond rating 54-page cybersecurity report for the institution that will impact our bond rating. So, you know, I feel confident again, and not to be overconfident, but, you know, we have such incredible resources pulled together here that I know that will be reflected, and that will be a bottom line item in that bond rating report from our institution. And I imagine many of you go through a very similar process. So it's nice to know that some of those boxes are quickly filled and checked, and you know, contribute to a real tangible there that might not on the surface be initially recognized.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Rob and Sean and Michelle, in addition to your points as well. I'm confident we can never apply enough resources to security. And so how do we invest it in the most strategic of ways? I think, Michelle, your point of what you said about, you know, building it on your own versus the scale of what OmniSOC provides us, exact same scenario for us. You know, we cannot ever have enough money to put into security like we want to. So we have to be smart about it. I think this has been a huge value add for us.
Thank you, everyone. I'll move on to our next question. We can probably get back into that a little bit as we go through.
I think you just need to have Michelle lead off with every response, because that gets the rest of us just going. So thank you.
Then we can just all sit and nod, right? I love it. Both the restore and evolve scenarios are characterized by significantly increased financial stress on the institution and therefore on IT, even though institutional leadership have an increased understanding of value of IT. Increased collaboration and partnerships, such as the OmniSOC, may be one effective response. And we heard that a little bit in the response to our last question. Where, in your opinion, are there opportunities for increased partnership and collaboration? What obstacles do you see to those opportunities? Sean, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So to answer this question, I want to start right with the OmniSOC. When we talk about opportunities for increased collaboration, if you think of how we got to where we were today, it was a strategy of doing what we are able to do and growing that over time. And I think you heard in the conversation this morning is we'd like to even do more. So, you know, we've got the threat detection, and we have humans looking at that and determining how the information gets pushed out to the partner institutions. And you also heard that the vision, though, is more machine learning, possibly automated response, so that the time from detection to response is very, very fast. So the first area that I think, when I think of increased opportunities for collaboration, are right in the space that we're in, is doing more with the trusted partners and the expanded partners that we envision to build out the OmniSOC. But a couple more areas just in terms of collaboration, and it is centered on, and OmniSOC gives us an advantage on that. And Brett mentioned it earlier, and that's about expertise and community. I know we, Kim, I know we have REN-ISAC and other communities, but when you have a group of institutions working to resolve some of the complex issues that we have in front of us with the shared platform and program that we have here, I believe the partnerships run very deep, and the expertise, including what you heard talked about this morning with interns, becomes that much richer. But there's other opportunities, and this will also speak to a challenge. You know, I think of something that we're doing in the Big Ten, another collaboration and you can think of SolarWinds as I talk about this, but we all do third-party assessments on our campuses. Every time we sign a contract, the CIO has to sign a contract as we engage with a new partner. And the volume of activity that happens in that space is just increasing with time. And how do we do that collaboratively? And in the Big Ten, a number of schools are doing that also. But all of these activities take a high level of trust and understanding between the institutions. And we would like to grow the participants in these collaborative initiatives that will free us from doing things locally that we can better do with community. But the challenge in this is, how do you grow it at a speed where it maintains those core values, understanding, and trust as you bring in new members? So you can always go faster. We know that by staying small and nimble, going alone, you can go faster, but do you have as strong a response? So that to me is one of the challenges as we look to expand programs is how do we do that, bringing in the right people to add the value to the organization. And the opportunity far outweighs, and the benefits outweigh the costs of bringing more in, but that's a challenge.
Thank you. Michelle.
So I mean, I agree with everything Sean has pointed to, and I don't know that there's anything super unique to add to that. I think that clearly we all need to figure out how to respond faster to these kinds of circumstances. I think that's always been our challenge, right? We can barely keep up. And so if there are ways to expand these working relationships to help us be faster in responding and protecting, maybe we even prevent, right? I mean, that's like the ultimate, right? We can completely prevent. But even reacting, can we react much faster? And certainly the basic premise to OmniSOC is that the more data you can see, the more patterns you can see, and the more ability you are to detect and respond, right? And so the more we can add to that and grow that, I think it's to all of our advantage whenever we can expand that. So even just starting with what we have and growing it is a valiant goal. I think, like I said earlier, higher ed is really good about sharing information. We're always trying to help each other, and we always compare notes and, yeah, this is how we did it. And, and here, this might be helpful to you, or tell me how you did it. So we don't do the same thing. I think where it gets challenging is when we try to actually build programs together. That is challenging. I think this has been a success, clearly, with what we're doing here. We were able to leverage some things that were already in place, but clearly, when you start to actually build it together, there are challenges, and you just got to figure out how to work through them. Sean, your point about how can we leverage the assessments that we do with our vendor partners, right? Our providers. That's a really good one. It's challenging because I might have requirements that look differently than yours sometimes, but however we can leverage in that space, I think would be helpful as well. And it might even be an advantage to our vendor partners, right? Where they don't have to keep doing it over and over again. They've got an assessment, and we can all rely on that assessment. So that might be something to explore as well, is how do we do that a little bit more effectively across our institutions. But yeah, I think that any way we can figure out how to join forces and leverage the things we already have in motion, I think is a good place to be focusing on this. I'll stop there.
Any other thoughts?
If I might, again, Michelle, thank you for that, because I think there's a piece in there that really resonates with me, and that's around the overhead cost of collaboration. And oftentimes that's the way it's described is, there's overhead in collaboration. It's more expensive. It's more timely. It's not lost on me that my predecessor was well known for frequently saying that, that is a learned skill and asset that organizations pick up over time. And so, there's some appreciation on my part for our colleagues across the higher education landscape, maybe looking at something like the OmniSOC and questioning, what does that bar look like and how high, of an overhead is that? But, at its core, higher education has that notion of collaboration and sharing. And so, for those looking at this through that lens, I just share that, everything you said there, that you're stronger because of that collaboration. And yes, it might on the surface initially seem like a little more overhead, but I think ultimately it's a substantial return on that investment.
I agree with that. I mean, it takes work and it takes contribution and it takes the time and effort component by all of us to make the partnership successful. That's what partnership means, everyone contributing in that way. And so I think as long as, all the players that are at the table are there with that principle, then most of the time you can make it work. We make it work that way. Sorry, Sean, I know you unmuted. Go ahead.
And the OmniSOC is in flight. So a lot of that startup cost has been borne, and it's just a question of alignment of objectives and, effort, I'm going to say, in a go forward way. So, and the biggest component being trust, right? Trust across members. So, yeah.
Something that really resonated that you said, Michelle, for me was the incident response and reaction, because that's where I live, right? And when we think about it, the threats have evolved massively. So we used to be able to rely on indicators of compromise. What's the URL that the bad stuff is coming from? And those days, that's still, we have to have that as base level security, but those days are over. We need to start looking from the inside out and not the outside in. And groups like OmniSOC, the OmniSOC allows us to do that, to compile that data, analyze that data, and get to that response quicker, that reaction quicker. So that's a great raise. Thank you. In the transform scenario, IT models agility and future thinking while designing programs and services. Too often, cybersecurity is an afterthought or an unwieldy bolt-on. What role can a SOC play to ensure solutions are baked in, flexible, responsive, and that flexible, responsive cybersecurity helps to accomplish institutional missions? Brett, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So, when I think about it as being an afterthought, I think that could have been the days of old. From my perspective, and I think probably like most of you, this last year, and I would say even prior to this last year, there's been an acceleration of our leadership understanding and appreciation, I think, for the strategic importance of security. I mean, you can't pick up a paper or read online, without seeing some type of national headline of some event that's happened outside of higher education or within higher education. So I think there's become a more appreciation by our leadership at our campuses, which I think is important. And it really helps elevate the strategic importance and mission-centric value that I think we provide, or that we need to be providing through agreements and collaborations like OmniSOC. I mean, we have board of regents, board of trustees, absolutely engaged in this, wanting to understand how are we defending ourselves, how are we scaling to make sure that we defend ourselves, while also at the same time staying within budget constraints. And so I think that's obviously a challenge as part of that. So I do think cyber is more and more baked into our strategic missions at the university. And it's a conversation at that table, which is important, which really helps set that stage. In my view, it's a core of everything that we need to be doing as IT organizations on our campuses. And it's, in our case, we actually listed as one of our strategic goals, one of our 5 strategic goals as a division of making sure that we provide secure services as part of those scalable solutions that we bake in. even more so, I think it's the responsibility of everybody. Security is. It's not just, it's not just us as CIOs or as our chief security officers. And I think it's really, pervasive in that every one of our IT staff, every person at the university has some role in security, whether that's how they act on their own behalf or how we, implement new services, whatever those things in. So in a lot of ways, I think it's a culture thing. And for us to really make that as a permanent bake-in for those resources that we have in our division. So when networking is implementing a new set of edge equipment on our networks, security should be at the forefront of that. How do we do microsegmentation as part of that? How do we make sure we have, certain health checks as part of that? So I think that's really important. But, at the core of all this, in my view, is where OmniSOC comes in. I mean, that agility that we need to lower those thresholds, to lower those barriers, to make, security easier, if you will, on some of those foundational aspects is important. I mean, we've seen the obvious incredible growth rate of cyber, the huge amounts of data we have. That's not going to slow down anytime soon, I don't think. I think it's just increasing at an even faster rate now over the last year, it seems like. And that agility is what, from my view, I think OmniSOC helps provide us. We've talked a lot about the value of our collaborations, the value of our partnerships, but I also think there's a value of just lowering that threshold to have some of these infrastructures in place, kind of, out of the box. I know I don't want to overstate that, but at least provides those core services that we together can scale up and work on in ways that we simply couldn't do on our own. You heard Sean talk about some of the machine learning and AI within OmniSOC. I mean, you think about the potential and growth that has for us. We're not going to grow, teams and dozens of people, all the time with this at the same rate of the data. But with, our collaborations and using technology and the machine learning aspect of that, I think the sky's the limit there. And I'm really excited about that. I know from our standpoint. So for us, OmniSOC's at the foundation of what we do. And, that innovation from our partnerships and scale is really something that we just simply couldn't do on our own. And I really see that as part of the strategic mission of our campuses to provide those types of services.
Great, thank you. Rob.
Yeah, great points, Brett, as well. It's not lost on me that the events of the last year for IT organizations in higher ed, where we were catapulted into a strong tactical and operational role in supporting a successful fall semester, and for many of us that meant figuring out how to establish systems and processes and integrations to things that we had never been asked to do before, and whether that was with our state or our county health directors or others, that security baseline was an absolute. I mean, we upped the game pretty substantially in terms of the criticality of the data that we were interacting with. And as good stewards of that data, was just critically important to have that security baked in from the ground up, whether it was EPHI, vaccination for flu or now for COVID, and collecting that information and disseminating that information and reporting back to the leadership of the institutions that we all work with. That security had to be there, baked in day one. And I think it was a strong expectation that there wouldn't be a single misstep in a time when so many of our IT organizations were asked to do something that, quite frankly, we never had to do before. And I've been quoted here locally a lot for saying, there wasn't the playbook in this one, to Michelle's point earlier. So often I can reach out to a colleague and say, hey, you guys implemented that new ERP system. What were some of the pitfalls of that? And what did that cost you? And, I can ask any multitude of questions and get incredible, profound perspective. And in this one, we're on the phone with each other, all saying things like, wow, can you believe we're asked to do this now? We were asked to do this, and I've never messed with one of these before. Have you guys done that? And so I think having that foundation, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues here on the panel, but again, it just led with a level of confidence, knowing that we had resources that were looking out for us, and even at pace in the midst of a global pandemic, where the likelihood of making a mistake was a little bit higher than when we have a year or two to plan for a major transition was there. We were able to navigate that in a way that I think really returned dividends to our institutions.
Thank you. I lost my place.
It was just such an exciting response for you.
It was, yeah. Any other comments on that? Yeah, I got it. I'm good. Thank you. All right. Thank you. We did ask for some questions from the public, the audience, and folks who are paying attention to this topic. And so I'm going to ask a few of those questions, and we might have more as we filter into this. One of the questions we got was, how will university information security organizations balance a commitment to accomplishing research, appropriate data security, and compliance? Brett, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, I think that's a really delicate balance. I mean, we don't want to be barriers for research to be successful, while at the same time we have a duty to protect the assets of our universities and make sure we do that in a secure way. And of course, we have compliance standards rolling out with 800-171. We have CMMC from the Department of Defense and other types of compliance concerns now. And that really, I think, elevates the conversation in ways that perhaps it wasn't elevated, at least in some of our campuses in the past. And so it really puts us at the table to be partners, I think, with our research communities, engage with them in ways that perhaps we haven't always been able to in the past. And my hope is provide some more scalable and secure solutions that they gain value out of, and we as security professionals and IT professionals can help make sure that we're doing it in the right way. And so, the days of USB drives from Best Buy and servers spread across our campuses with research data that needs to meet these compliance requirements, I think those are over. That's a vision of how do we tackle those types of issues. Because without that security, we can't simply scale on our own independent campuses to support hundreds and thousands of data just spread to the wind and try to fill out data management plans and security and compliance requirements around each one of those. That just doesn't scale well. So as we're talking about scale with OmniSOC, I mean, even in that way, I would hope that our vision of providing some more cloud or on-premise types of solutions that can scale and meet some of those compliance standards out of the box, that you can point people to, you can partner with, and make sure that you have the security around it, that you have the logging around it, that we can send those logs back to OmniSOC and make sure we're meeting those requirements. I think that's a really important aspect of what we need to be doing going forward. In a way, though, again, that lowers some of those conflict points to make sure that we're not a barrier to to the good research that is going on. We're viewed as good partners at that same table.
Sean?
So this is an area that I think requires more attention locally on many campuses. I think that in many ways, information security is an enabler of research. And how do we just provide the programs and the infrastructure to make that more seamless for the researchers? In many ways, sorry, I'm doing a plug for accessibility here. Mission of institutions are to create and disseminate information. So accessibility is a means to that end. Information security is a means. I think on our campuses, we do a very good job of information security in the areas where our information assets require the highest level of protection, I'm going to say. But from a campus-wide perspective, I think we continue to have areas where when a grant application or a grant contract is being signed, all of a sudden information security becomes very, very important. CMMC or as Brett was saying. And we're kind of dealing with these in an ad hoc way. So how can we pivot and put resources into building foundation so that we have effectively zones when we talk about people, process, and technology for different research? And as long as the researchers, lab, center, whatever it is working within one of those predefined zones, then it's going to be easy to say that it's compliant or have it audited or whatever that is. So the researcher we need to get more programmatic that way so that the researcher isn't focused on it. So I see them as very complementary, research and information security and compliance.
Rob, Michelle, anything from you?
Yeah, I'll reiterate a couple of things here. So I think I was really resonating to Brett's points about partnership, and then Sean's your points about just kind of how this works in the research space and the complexity of it all, right? I think this is actually an area where we need more involvement. We need more progress. I think we've made progress, but we have, in my view, we've got a little ways to go here, right? Because of all the aspects of our institution, this is probably one of the most distributed aspects, right? In terms of the data and the research. I know that our research community is feeling more pressure to protect their assets, both data and the intellectual property. It's a thing. I mean, it's like a big topic right now, and the granting programs require more. There's, just these continual increasing threats to that protection. And so our ability to partner with them, to help them understand what it means to protect, to give them the tools that will help make it easier. Ultimately, they want to make sure their stuff's protected, but they also need to get their grant on time, and they don't want anything to get in the way of time-wise. So how can we work with them as best we can to make sure we can be in there as early in the process as possible? But when we're not, okay, let's see where we can land and what we can recover and what we can reposition after the fact to make sure that their information is protected and we're protected as an institution. It's pretty complex, and we're constantly looking for ways to inform and to grow that and to be better at that all the way around. So I just acknowledge those points my colleagues made there.
All right, final question. What role do you see the OmniSOC playing in a post-pandemic world? Let's start with you again, Michelle.
Well, I think we've pointed to it several times. I think this program is strong. I think the post-pandemic world, it feels like it will be more complex. I think we're all trying to figure out, what does that exactly mean? I know from my perspective, I'm hoping the things that our communities have learned to do this last year and a half with the tools will stick, right? We want sticking power. We know some of it will go back, but the comfort level with our community, our individuals, is definitely higher. We're all comfortable using these tools much better, and in some cases more effectively. So post-pandemic, I think we've been touching on it. It's going to be more complex security-wise. I just think the home networks bring a whole different layer of challenge that we've had to grapple with. And so I think OmniSOC is just it's growing it, and again, it's helping us be more proactive or detect faster so that we can react faster, and helping us understand what those new trends are going to be and what the new threats are going to be. And they can, because there's an expanded set of information there that we're able to work with now. So I think it's continuing to evolve it and evolve the capabilities and continuing to leverage it, and us learning how to maybe even leverage it even more than what we are today as institutions. So I'll stop there.
Rob, any follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly the work from home scenario that Michelle references, we're all too painfully familiar with what this means in terms of our ability to manage tens of thousands of endpoint devices on networks, routers, and connections that we know nothing about. And so, clearly that is a landscape that we're all entering into in a way that we didn't have a lot of choice and preparation in getting there. And I'd also touch on some of what Brett just spoke to around working with our researchers. I think OmniSOC really is uniquely positioned to demonstrate to them that IT and cybersecurity isn't an obstacle It's not, something that's put in the way to make your research effort more difficult. It's actually an enabler. And it's always interesting to me, and I'm sure to many of you, out there, when when somebody is doing research and the system or the service or the instrument that they're working with is compromised, and now they're dealing with ransomware, and their $50 million NIH grant is on halt until they pay 5 or 50 or whatever the ransom is to get that out of there. Having a conversation with them about these policies, these procedures, and these approaches aren't there to make your life difficult. But boy, it's a hard conversation to have before the event happens. But I think if we and OmniSOC being just uniquely positioned to demonstrate to our research colleagues, we're here to help support your mission, in support of the mission of the institution. And clearly research is a tremendous portion of that for so many of our institutions. To me, that would be the definition of success over the next year or two, is that more and more of our researchers would see the benefit and the value of that, and how it not only helped them deliver upon the research grants and awards that they've received, but ideally that the fact that they're members in OmniSOC, it enables them to be more competitive in their application for new grants and awards.
Any final thoughts from our panelists? Okay, well, I'm glad we had this discussion. That was a very quick, almost hour. Thank you so much. And you saw me scribbling notes. You all said things that were very pertinent for me too. I hope this discussion spurs new thinking and possibly evolves new actions to benefit cybersecurity and help our organizations. And we want to help our organizations restore, evolve, and transform. So thank you so much to our panelists. This was a great talk, and I appreciate your time.